I've never met Kristen's father. I don't know what he looks like. There are no pictures of him around the house. I've heard his voice on the phone a few times. He's an air traffic controller who speaks in flat and even tones, like a guy who doesn't get too excited about things. 4. Rebecca and I get a burger apiece and split a basket of fries. She says she's learning a lot and getting so many stories in the paper she's sick of seeing her byline, although so much of her stuff is rewritten. It's hard to tell if she's doing it right. She never gets any feedback. Nobody seems to have the time. I say cop stories are routine. There's a certain way to write them, key elements you always play up. She asks what they are. She says she wants to know. Blood, guts, gore. She dips a fry in the ketchup. Is that your secret? It's no secret. There has to be a secret. Everyone tells me how good you are. She leans toward me and puts her hand on my wrist and asks me this. Who killed Megan? Some kid named Brad, probably. There must be a million kids named Brad in the valley. Yeah, but only one of them is Jeremiah Devlin's son. She looks around as if hoping somebody she knows will walk up and spare her from pursuing this conversation. Who's Jeremiah Devlin? She asks at last. I push myself from the table and break the touch of her skin and wipe my hands and mouth with a paper napkin. Then I toss the napkin onto my tray. Jesus, didn't they teach you anything in college? Noreen stares at the TV. The weather's on. It's supposed to be sunny tomorrow. Kristen saw a psychologist today, she says. The appointment was set up by the school district, and Noreen left work early to be there. Her boss was upset and said this better not happen again. The company can always find a replacement for a data processing supervisor. The psychologist asked Kristen her name. The girl answered in a low and nervous tone. Then the psychologist asked where she lived, and Kristen gave 2 addresses, her mother's and her father's. When the psychologist asked Kristen for her phone number, she gave 2 of those also. The psychologist asked Kristen more questions and ran Kristen through a battery of tests. When they were done, he said the results were preliminary, of course, and he'd have to analyze them further. But from what he can tell, it seems obvious. Kristen blames herself for the breakup of her parents' marriage and continues to hope they'll get back together. These feelings are common among the children of divorce. Sometimes they never go away. Noreen looks up at the ceiling and down at the floor, everywhere, but at me. There's one more thing she wants me to know. It's been gnawing at her all day, and she wonders if she should even tell me, but she's going to because, well, she's just going to. The beer I'm drinking is flat, and Noreen says that at one point in the session, the psychologist asked Kristen if anything in particular was bothering her, and Kristen nodded and said yes, very softly. And the psychologist asked what it was, and Kristen said, my mommy has a boyfriend. Noreen shuts her eyes. Whoever did it at night. He brought the body here during the darkness. He was free to do it then. He carried Megan's dead weight up the slope to the top of Spavalda Pass and laid her out in the open, as if he were proud of what he'd done. The lights of the valley stretch out in the distance, and I think of the people in cars, the people in malls, the people in their homes nestled in front of their televisions while murders are done. I wonder what it's like to feel someone's life ebb away, to be the cause of it. I go back down the slope, but before I reach my car, I catch a glint of moonlight reflecting off something on the ground. It's under a bush and some dirt, and it looks as if it's been there a while. I pull the thing up with a pen and shake off the dirt and bring it close to my face. It's a gold band laced with stones, small but thick and broken in the back. Rebecca informs me that Megan's father has been arrested for setting up a drug ring at the beach. Apparently, he had organized it from the back of the surf shop. Bail has been set at $1 million. When I call Gruely, he says there's no way he's going to talk about it. I ask if Mr. Wright is a suspect in his daughter's death. Gruely says nothing has been ruled out, although they believe he spent most of that night in a meeting with several Colombians. I ask if it's possible Megan knew about his activities. Maybe he was afraid she'd expose them. The detective says it's an interesting story. Every case has theories. I ask if he's talked to Brad yet. Brad who? There are 1 million guys named Brad. More than 1 million. I tell him what I know. Megan left the house that night with a kid named Brad. Brad's father is Jeremiah Devlin. Remember him? Who, it appears, has a relationship, probably romantic, with Megan's mother. That Brad, I say. The detective tells me off the record that he's certainly very, interested in what Brad was doing that night. And he'd be quite happy to talk with the boy because there are a number of things they'd like to go over, but he's been, shall we say, unavailable for comments. You mean you can't find him? I say. I'm not going to confirm that. Maybe they stashed him in Monte Carlo or something. Maybe they did. The very rich are different from me and you. Yeah, they have more money. I knew you'd say that. I hear the sound of papers being shuffled, and I sense he has more facts to tell me, so I stay on the line. He says, ever so cautiously, that he's been doing some reading this morning. What is it, I ask. An autopsy report. I wait for him to say more. Age, 13. Sex, female. Race, Caucasian. Came from the Caucasus. Height, 5'3". Weight, 102. Cause of death, head smashed in like a melon. Drowning. What? Heads turn. I wish I had said nothing. I hate when people stare at me. That's what it says. Her lungs were filled with water. That doesn't make sense. Since when are killings supposed to make sense? But why was she beaten like that? I guess they wanted to make sure she was dead. Or else they just enjoyed doing it. Why are you using the plural? I ask. I wasn't aware that I was, Gurley says. It might have been a he or a she for all I know. Steam rises from the medical examiner's coffee, smoke from his cigarette, and a half-eaten jelly donut lies in front of a picture of his wife. The walls of Dr. Jack Karch's office are covered with framed photos that show him at work on celebrities and presidential candidates. I keep expecting to see you down there someday, he says, on one of my slabs. He takes a bite from the donut. A trickle of jelly oozes out of the side. Years of working with chemicals have turned his fingernails a faint shade of green. I say I find his report a little hard to believe. How do you think we feel? He tells me they could have said the easy things. Blunt head trauma. Yes, the girl was definitely raped. Case closed. Let's move on to the next one. There are always so many bodies, but facts are facts. They demand attention. The girl was drowned. Drownings can be accidental, I say. Getting your head cracked open usually isn't. Did the rape occur before or after she was killed? Can't tell. We may be dealing with sick fuckers. Pun intended. How long has she been dead before the body was found? 10, 12 hours? A while? Rigor mortis had set in. You would have noticed that if you were as observant as you think you are. I ask if he's told anyone else about the result, and he says someone called from Jeremiah Devlin's office, so he gave her the details. I ask if he's giving out this information to just anybody who wants it, and he says it's all part of the public record, and he is sure as hell isn't going to tell Jeremiah Devlin to get lost. I ask if Megan's mother is called, and he says she hasn't. But he hears she has something going with the rich guy, so he assumes he told her. I say Megan's mother has made out quite nicely for herself. You have a suspicious mind, Karch says. That's why I like you. I open the drawer where I keep my special things. A small manila envelope has what I'm looking for. I shake out what's inside and it spills onto the table. I pick it up with a pair of tweezers and hold it against the light. The stones are diamonds, cut up and sprinkled throughout the necklace. The gold is 18 karat. I've checked it against a catalog. Engraved inside this object I now regard as precious is the symbol of the store in which it was sold. I recognize it as one of the upper-end shops at the Beverly Center. The phone rings. I'm so startled I drop the tweezers. The answering machine kicks on, and I hear Rebecca's voice saying there's something she wants to talk about, and she's so sorry to bother me at home, but it's important. She leaves her number. She tells me to call any time. I pick up the necklace off the floor and blow the dust and dirt before sliding it back into its place. I wonder if it fell from her body. I wonder if it's even hers. I wonder if there are fingerprints or microscopic bits of blood or anything else the police might find useful. I should give it to them. But I want to keep it. Somehow this object connects me to her. It gives life to the beaten up thing I saw at the top of Spavalda Pass. What did she know? I ask myself. What can she tell me? When I call Rebecca, she says she's going over her notes and something struck her. Something strange that didn't add up, so she thought she would talk it over with someone who might have an answer, or at least an explanation. I tell her, go ahead, I'm listening. She says Megan's father posted bail, but he doesn't have that kind of money, or shouldn't have. She also wonders how he came up with the funds for that drug ring he's supposed to be masterminding. An operation like that requires a lot of cash, which, once again, our aging surfer dude doesn't have, or shouldn't have. I say it's like any other business. Having your own capital is unimportant. The key is financing. That's my point, Rebecca says. Who loaned him the money? He's not what I call a good credit risk. I'm about to reply to give some logical or at least plausible response when I stop because I realize I don't have one. As I punch in the number, I tell myself this is crazy. This is stupid. This will never work. This is Mr. Devlin's office. Is Mr. Devlin in? I'm sorry, he's in a meeting. Can I help you? As I identify myself, I feel the voice on the other end contracting, ready to address me in brusque tones indicating that I am, as a lower life form, barely tolerate it. What is this in reference to? The voice is used to fielding calls about mergers and acquisitions, contracts and negotiations, deals and debentures. I can tell it's ready to refer me to the PR people. I say I'm calling about his son. I understand Brad's name has been mentioned in connection with Megan Wright's case. I was at the funeral and I was touched by the concern they showed for the girl and her family. I have a few questions I'd like to ask. I'll give him the message, sir. Noreen kisses me as I walk through the door. Kristen is at her father's tonight. We drink some wine, watch the news on TV. The correspondent stands in front of a used bookstore in Burbank that was ransacked by a gang of youths last night. They beat the owner to death and sexually assaulted a female clerk and smashed and ripped a lot of merchandise, but they took no money. Police say they're baffled. Back at the studio, the anchor asks the weatherman how long the heat wave will last. We go to the Mexican place. Raul asks how Kristen is. Noreen says she's fine. Lately, she's been seeing a child psychologist and appears to be helping. Kristen is a quiet girl who keeps things inside, but now she's expressing herself, and that's good, of course. Now they know what the problems are. Raul says it's amazing what goes on in the mind of children. Or when Noreen excuses herself, Raul leans close to me and says I'm a lucky man, and I ask why. And he says it's because of her. She's a good woman, but she carries around a lot of sadness. He asks if I'm kind to her, and I say I do the best I can. After Noreen returns, Raul says he's been reading my stories, and the case is getting more complex with each passing day, and I nod and say yes, it's a weird one, all right. Noreen says she doesn't want to talk about it. Raul says it's a privilege to know someone who does such interesting work. His job is so very important. Noreen asks if we can talk about something. Raul says he's mentioned my name to many of his friends, and they're all following the case. Everyone wants to know who committed the crime. He says it's almost as if I'm orchestrating the story so everyone will know my name. I tell him I'm not that clever. And I'm not sure who did it, and I don't think the police do either. Noreen says, let's please change the topic of discussion. Please. Back at Noreen's, there's a message on the machine. Kristen has called to say goodnight. Her voice says, I love you, Mommy. And then there's a pause. I wish you were home, Mommy. How come you're not home? Noreen bites her lower lip. I stare at the floor and notice some cracks in the tile. My lady friend sighs and walks into the living room. It's not your fault, she says. It's a voice with no body attached to it. I've been absolved for a sin I was unaware of committing. I try to think of what I've done wrong, words I might have said or failed to say, thoughts I attempt to suppress that she no doubt senses anyway. Kristen's problems aren't your fault, Noreen says. I don't think anyone's at fault. Things just happen. We search for meaning behind events, but there is none. We waste our lives in a futile quest for reasons. I get my jacket and reach into the pocket. I can feel my car keys.